I'm angry. I won't lie. I'm angry. I am very tired of seeing people that have no reason to suffer be made to suffer for us to have plastics and one person to drive €30,000 vehicle and all by themselves pump out. I'm angry, and that anger I've tried to funnel and pour it into the work itself.
And welcome to the show, Mustafah, and I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me. I'm a photographer. I'm a documentary photographer from New York City originally, and I've been living in Berlin for about 11 or 12 years now. My work focuses mainly on climate change. And instead of diving right at climate change or going directly at it, I've tried to come at it from the side. So the work that I started about 10, 11 years ago is something that I've been continuing to this day. It's called Water. And it documents a resource that is in crisis, but it isn't necessarily always about the resource. It is about a way in which human beings interact with the natural world. And we have seen this in the news. We've seen this years past in major issues across the planet, where the question is, what are we doing to it and what is it doing to us? And I thought by using water, by using this subject, I could hold up a mirror for a whole lot of other subject matter that it would be nearly impossible to photograph in one lifetime. And so in some ways, the work is conceptual in its intent, in its commentary. In other ways, it's reportage. I'm documenting real world events. Nothing is posed. Everything is, in some ways, a piece of a larger puzzle. But within each aspect, within each story, whether it's country, theme, region, topic, I tried to, in some way, knit together this common human experience where we are reflecting our hubris, our concern, our priorities, all these very, very difficult aspects of human behavior that are oftentimes difficult to communicate with photographs. So I wanted to use the project as this, and then it's kind of spiraled out of control. It's kind of gone beyond that, as it should, as you would hope, for something that's as relevant and as important as this. And it started to become a work that requires other aspects and other delivery methods and other methodologies to communicate and to illustrate. So that Water, what I'm showing first, is the kind of the core of the work. It's what I started in 2011, what I'll continue to do probably for a long time. And then I might show a part of the work or some photographs from the second part, Water Part 2, that isn't public yet. So I show a few photographs from that, and it'd be really nice to share that for the first time. And then there's some photographs that I made last year, a series called Arctic, about similar themes, but not necessarily as didactic as being only about water. It's kind of an expansion of this idea, a step forward. So hopefully we have enough time to walk through all of those, and I'll reiterate what
I kind of want to know about you in the beginning and what started you on this journey into photography. I read a great interview of you with Mamiya 7, and you just kind of started photographing, and you started doing photography work. But how were you? What were you like before you became a photographer?
Interesting question. I wasn't expecting that.
What about your story?
Yeah, what was I like?
Yeah,
what's the
story? Where did you? Yeah,
what's the origin myth?
yeah.
I would say very peculiar. I would say I was a very strange kid. I can say that a lot of my upbringing or childhood, a lot of the memories that really stand out to me the most, have a lot to do with confusion and a lot to do with a feeling of separateness, alienation. And this comes from as much from culture as it comes from class, as it comes from personal experiences, excuse me. And I can't say that I helped it any which way. I grew up in New York, and then my parents moved out of the state, and this constant change of locations from childhood, mixing with a very, I would say, unfulfilled sense of belonging. I suppose everyone goes through that. That's a part I do believe in America most particularly, but I feel like it's kind of resonates everywhere. That belonging is a major topic of early development. But for me, it never felt like the question was answered. I felt like I had never quite belonged or fit into any one group or any one way of being. And this informed a lot about how I felt about myself. This made me, I would say, feel very vulnerable in that type of society. America can be a unforgiving environment for those who are different. And I did feel very, but I was also very fortunate that my mother, very sensitive woman, she, a domestic violence counselor and teacher, and trained psychologist, and she was very, very in tune to trying to raise a son whose personal experiences growing up were different from her own, but who felt quite troubled and out of place. And she did a really good job. I would say a lot of my best qualities, I think all of my best qualities come from my mother. And this speaks to her level of sensitivity and attunement and attentiveness that she had towards other people and what they were going through and what they felt. And I felt that growing up. So in answer to that question, I felt very confused and a bit lost. I would say I felt very lost all the way up until I picked up, before I picked up. I mean, I don't know if that actually changed anything. I think I oftentimes still feel lost as a person, not in the same way, but at the time of like the late teenage years before I came up across Richard Avedon's work, which was my first introduction to photography, I felt that there was no real clear, fulfilling answer to this dislocation that I perpetually was troubled by. And I think photography in some ways was the balm and a new spark, a new motivation to take those feelings of confusion and do something about them. Do something about them for my own sake, do something about them for the sake of those immediately around me. Because photography at the end of the day is communication. It's about understanding. It's about reflection. It's about so many things that are indispensable to human interaction. So to kind of rewind, I got a left ahead, but to kind of rewind before photography, I didn't have that belonging. My mother, I would say, was my main guiding light for what to do with those feelings. And she always encouraged a sense of volunteerism, a matter and character that personified a certain selflessness and anti-materialism that was very out of place for America, especially in New York City, I mean, the late 90s was a booming economy, and this was a time of unchecked behavior in my culture. So, and this is where I came of age. So that confusion mixed with the country around me feeling like it was entirely unconcerned about people that looked like me or people that sounded like me, that were biracial or that had learning disabilities or speech impediments or all matters of things that set you apart. So I would say my mother helped shepherd that confusion into purpose. She encouraged the idea that one must have character in all aspects of their life. And this was particularly troubling for me because I felt that the questions that I had about what are the roles of a citizen in the United States at that time? What's my role as a young adult? What do I want? What can I do with this? What's my responsibility to other people? What's my responsibility to myself? Is it only about what I can get? Is it only about what things I can buy, or what I can appear as, or the vapid nature of like, unchecked capitalism? I felt like I know those things made an ounce of sense. And my mother really encouraged introspection. She encouraged patience. She encouraged trying to see beyond those barriers so that I can understand why those people that believe in those ideas believe what they do. And by doing so, be an example for a way of being that I think she really thought would be the best for me. So I would say before that, I was just in summary, I was a confused, maybe a little angry outsider, outcast, and photography in some ways gave that direction where I could say, well, if I feel this way, then there's probably a ton of other people that maybe do, and maybe I belong with those people. Maybe I belong with people who feel massively misunderstood or outside of the status quo, or feel like they lack certain opportunities, and define themselves by answering those challenges in original, honest ways that are caring. And I found that the camera gave me purpose. It gave me the ability to go to those people and show my desire to connect with them and express what I felt about things. And you can oftentimes tell the compassion of a human being and their ability to see beyond the obvious. And the people that I connected with before photography and then into it, they helped illuminate and support that way of thinking, that way of being. And so in some ways, these points in time were concurrent. They went hand in hand. When you go and seek, you're also highly likely to be found. So, yeah. So that's
a couple of things that stood out to me was this idea of volunteerism and anti-materialism, and you had a couple of things. It sounds like your mother was a huge influence on you, and I kind of hear that the mythical origin story you just shared. I'm just kidding, but Spider-Man's origin story. Now,
what I heard, that story's been told countless times, too many times. So, that's actually a real good comparison. Eventually, when you start trying to contextualize your life for others, it's all you try not to repeat yourself, and I do believe that's what the comment did touch upon, is this fact that Spider-Man's origin story just repeats itself. But what's interesting about that comment actually is that if done to some challenging degree, then I do believe by looking backwards, you can actually dissect that origin story, that myth, that thing that you tell yourself, that you learned about yourself, and have to kind of challenge it and hold it up for inspection in the manner in which you tell it. So if you hear me say a lot, that's me trying to. That's the sound of a poorly focused human being trying to bullseye their way past bullshit. So
I really like that last line. Bullseye their way past bullshit. That is fantastic.
Trying to say something else.
Yeah, it's true. What I was gonna where I was kind of going with that was your two subjects, the Arctic series and even the water series that are both still ongoing. They're massive topics, and their implications are worldwide. It's every single person. It's a very, very big task to take. And I was reading an article that you had done, and you knew when you started this that it was going to be a long project and an ongoing one. And so, talk to me about what kind of inspired you into this. Was it just kind of like, I just want to go and find out and let the journey teach me, or does like research play into how you kind of got started in this series? I want to jump into that before we actually jump in to the series.
Sure. I think that work was a natural progression for my desire to apply this. And I looked at a lot of topics around 2009, 2010. I guess, I mean, it's pretty sad. That's what I do with my free time as a photographer, is I'm reading, researching things. So I had a very, very exciting social life during 2009 and 2010, as you can say. I was researching a lot at that time. And the reason why is that I wanted to find something that was fitting for the idea. So I believe every photographer has, in some ways, their own value, their own contribution, their own, use the word journey. I would say something like they have their own set of choices and challenges that will define what they value, who they touch, how they speak to people. And I find that extraordinary. So individualized and personalized that it goes hand in hand with self-development. So on that note, on the idea of self-development and personal vision, what your contribution is to your own self and to the environment around you, I was looking for topics around 2009. I was looking for things, ideas, subgenres, groups of people. I looked at what in my own past growing up, was there something there that I felt particularly responsible to speak about, or in the position to speak about it in a meaningful way. And I found that I was not interested at all with talking about by being biracial. I was not interested at all about talking about being American. I was not interested at all about talking about any of these personal, very close stories that I could speak. And it took me a long while to understand why that choice felt so wrong to make, to go after those things. Why I felt disingenuous, or in some ways not a good choice. Maybe I circle back to that later on. But at that time, 2009, I'm
curious now.
I had been a photographer for some time, and I was really just looking for, where's my belonging with my voice? What challenges me? What interests me? And I looked at themes. I've always been a person who uses comparison and analogy and metaphor as a way to understand scale and to imply a way to reverse engineer how other things function, or how other people might think. And I suppose that is the maybe it's a common method of an outsider, or someone who feels that they continually flit and move between places and things that they never quite prescribe to. So with that in mind, I wanted something that was grand, but not grand in just size or scope, but grand in vision, a way in which to push fully the throttle forward on what my eye and what I'm made of, so that I can see, am I supposed to be doing this? Am I supposed to be contributing to this time period and speak about meaningful things, or should I go and photograph twigs and shit? At what point do I view what I'm doing as not only my own, but a contribution to something, or do I just view these things on a materialistic gain and think of what I can get from them in terms of money or prestige or whatever? And I was trying to answer that question during my research, finding what people would justify my time on this bird. So when we mentioned this project, I really want to hone in on, when I'm speaking about water, Arctic, and maybe the other stuff that I want to show, that the means of our communication is time. It's fundamentally time, not just in this superficial aspect of 1/60th of a second, whatever bullshit, but like more so the meaning of like, this is your time on this planet. And when you give time to another human being, give them consideration, sympathy, and empathy, and an ear, and you listen to their story, or you try to give meaning to something of your own story, you're giving your time. And I do believe your time is the most valuable thing you have. Everything else is debatable. So knowing that every single person on this planet is facing a time period then in 2009 when I was researching, and now 2023 we're having this conversation, and into the foreseeable future, that we're all facing a period of time in which our very existence is up for debate. Our very future is up for debate. Our moralism of how we use this economic system has long been up for debate. That the time that we contribute into these systems, into this world, what we're doing to it, what it creates in the time scale for our children's generation and those that come after, and if the planet is not taken care of, that all of these things have to do with time. And I thought, I want to contribute to this time. I want to contribute my time, and I want to contribute to this time. So before we jumped on this, I kind of spoke a little bit about the role of responsibility of contribution that I believe photography has the capacity for. And I felt that in 2009. My research was into energy, it was into migration, it was into it was into mainly large-scale human behaviors, because those large-scale human behaviors will dictate and determine what we do with our future and what we do with our immediate choices. And I thought I wanted to use photography to address that. I wanted to comment upon it. I wanted to evolve and learn and adapt, and in some ways sought a subject matter that would let me do that. And then after some time, I realized there was always water. Not water in the sense of just a resource, but water in the sense that I could use this topic as a reflector, as a mirror. I could photograph these very real world issues as reportage, and then I could kind of subvert it by the human element, the interpersonal element, the one that comes from me, where I can express my feelings towards what I'm seeing, and try to make those two things overlap across a long period of time, and use this one project to reimagine and whoop, my screen suddenly did. To reimagine what I could offer this time, this moment. And that's really the origin of the idea. So 10 years was not really ever realistic. And I had a feeling, to be honest with you, it wasn't realistic. I had to say some, the thing, like, fake it till you make it. I think I watched an interview with Tom Hardy the other day, and he was talking about acting. It's just I'm paraphrasing a real great actor, but essentially it was just saying, you gotta go, you gotta dive into it. You gotta like, even if you have no photographs and you have the conviction of an idea, or the sense that you can contribute something, then you just gotta go and do it. You forget all the rest. Just keep doing it until it works. And so that kind of, for me, would really explain the origin of that. 10 years was,
I think that's amazing. It's especially, you're fairly young when you got started, and so to have that kind of long perspective is amazing. I often try to tell people when they ask me, they go, well, how do I come up with a series or whatever? I say, find an interest and do it for a really long time and just see what happens, and be more interested in a long game versus a short game. And if the project is just going to be snap, then it's not long enough. It's probably not deep enough. If it's something that you're obsessed with and that just keeps pulling you through life. I think has value, and I hear that in you, and I'm really it's one of the reasons I'm drawn to your work is I can feel that awareness. So do you think having a sense of the long game, or what I'm calling the long game, is what kind of inspires how you photograph? Does it change the way you photograph? You're not such in a hurry to get 24 frames or whatever. You're trying to find the exact frame. Do you understand my question here? Do you feel like that influences the end product?
Yeah, I like to imagine that I like to hurry to go slow, and I like to slow to speed up. And what I mean by that is that I like to research a lot, or read a lot, or have a lot of conversations about the subject matter that before I photograph. I like to immerse myself, and in some ways, like, make myself a little manic about each individual story that I'm diving into, and then I want to go there and just forget about it. I want to speak to people. I want that human element of immediacy to be the only real parameter and priority from which to judge what is a photograph, rather than saying, like, what's a frame, or like, is this frame what I want? I don't really think in this matter. I can't honestly say that when I had photographed, I think I want something. What I wish, maybe I should, but I don't really think that way. I think more so that life is way too interesting to be easily understood by me or anyone. And I think as photographers, we would benefit more from recognizing that conviction and discipline and hard work and showing up at 6 a.m. and listening, and not, speaking to your subject or speaking over them, but really, really trying to dial into, like, what makes that particular person see you in a certain way, or want to speak in a certain way. And if you have this nuance, if you have this ability to, like, clock in some way to someone's vibe, then you're on the right path to something, and you don't always have to know what it is. And I don't really want to be like esoteric about it. Like, in very concrete terms, go and do the work.
Yeah.
And do the work when no one's watching, and do the work when someone's watching, in the same exact way, with conviction and morals and ethics and all these things that are outside, oftentimes, the conversation that people have when they speak about photography. They speak about photography in a very, I would say, the conversations that I don't like when it comes to photography tend to be the ones that are perhaps too esoteric. Let's break it down. It's the human element. You got to show up somewhere. You got to earn someone's trust, or you got to be clever enough to get through that door, or you got to be ahead of the game just a little bit to make sure you could stretch €5 into 20. Whatever you have to do to find what that is, you do it, and then you'll be rewarded with all the brilliant chaos that life actually constitutes. And that's endless. The thing that actually makes it difficult for me is I would like to photograph more. Honestly, I would like to photograph more, but I do not think that photographing more would make me a better photographer. I think the type of person I am it defines the type of photographer I can be. And there's other photographers I watch and I look at their work, absolutely floored. I'm like, I look at what they produce and at the time scale they produce it and how they shoot, and I'm just like, oh my God, like, they put out such amazing works, back, editorial after editorial, essay after essay, and I just can't, I can't do that. Like, I know what I can do, and I know what I am, and I'm just I'm a patient person. I like to wait, and that means that I have to oftentimes wait months between my photographs, or I have to wait hours between the moments in which I honestly feel this unusual sensation of this means something. And then whenever I feel that, if I don't feel that, like, I can't fake it. I mean, who am I faking it? Myself? It's just me out there, lying to myself? No, it makes no sense. So I think photography, in my manner of approaching it, I try to make it correlate honestly with the person that I am. And that's what I hope comes through in the work, is you feel me, but not as this rambling voice, but you feel the human being. And perhaps if you feel that, you're able to listen to another person's experience.
Well, I love the, you were talking about previously in a previous answer, you're talking about this idea of time, and you can feel, and you were talking about that distance between, photographs, I can feel the time in your work. And I think this is a great opportunity to kind of dive into looking at some of these visuals. So you can kind of like dissect a little bit of, or just kind of take us into your world for a little bit, into the project.
Sure. So I'm going to start with the main project, Water. The goal of this project is to be a living document, an ongoing photographic commentary that uses this resource and the issues that face us with this resource as a mirror for all of our other concerns and behaviors. It's almost as like a human study. I try to imagine it's less like a reportage on like a water crisis, which is oftentimes how it's contextualized based off the needs of explaining these types of photographs in certain media or certain types of publications. But for me, it's not that. What it really is a study on human beings at this crucial juncture of the Anthropocene, where we are being affected deeply by the choices that we are making collectively as a species. And I do this by dialing into this myriad of ways in which we view this one resource, and hopefully by viewing this one resource, it kind of fractures and refracts the idea into like back into a spectrum of other understandings and perspectives. So the first photograph that I'm going to show is of a man seeking forgiveness from a church group that's on the deserted side of a road in South Africa during the drought in 2018. I came across them during my weeks in Cape Town. I was down there for this piece of the work. So I started the work in 2011, and by this time, I had been photographing for about 7 years in different countries, ranging from the Americas to 3 points of the African continent, east, west, and slightly central, and then also Southeast Asia and Asia. So with this photograph, the reason why I like leading with it is, in some ways, this was a coming home for me, this photograph. It is very simple. I'm just kneeling in the dirt. I have met these people very short time before, and I didn't know I was going to meet them. I didn't know what I was looking for that particular day. I was actually, I believe, on my way. I was driving this Land Rover to this truck out to a reservoir, and I knew I would need this 4-wheel because I knew that the reservoir was very dry, and I would have to kind of off-road it a bit. And so my eyes were kind of just, as I was driving off-road, I was just kind of scanning and seeing, or I really just paying attention to what's happening in these far off areas between towns and between roads. And when I came across this, what I was struck by was that the whole group, it was about maybe 30 people, mostly women, and then there were some children on the outskirts, and they were singing. I had seen things like this before in the South, in the American South, in Baptist churches that I photographed back when I started my work. And I was of course very drawn to that. I was curious as to, what everyone was viewing this event as, what this church, the Sunday service, what they were viewing this. So I was watching what they were doing as I approached, and I noticed that there was one man off to the side, the man that you see here, and he was wearing one of their shawls that they had draped over his shoulders. That's coming from him. That white fabric is from them, not from him. And he had arrived to them much in the same way that I had. He didn't know any of them, but through observing the moment and also afterwards speaking to people, I found out that he was seeking forgiveness and purification for his addiction to alcohol and tobacco and some other things that he felt trapped by. And so you have in one photograph 2 strangers, me and him, and the belonging that we see, this hand that's on his head, this belonging is this otherworldly belonging. It's coming from someone off screen, from someone away from the frame. And in some ways, that symbol, I really like that symbol of both comfort and reassurance. Is very biblical. It's very religious. In some ways, it also feels like a parent. And oftentimes in spirituality, religion, it coincides with the familial. And I like this allegory. I like this symbolism. And that's why I was kneeling. That's what originally attracted me to that moment, was the hand upon the head. And so you keep in mind that I'm photographing water. At this point, 7 years of traveling around the world, and yet I have no idea what's about to happen next. All I'm kneeling there is because I'm just as interested in witnessing this touch from one human being to another in this deserted, barren landscape that's been, it's so suffering of drought that they're going to run out of water. That's the reason why Le Monde M magazine sent me there. I pitched it to them, but they sent me, and the reason was that Cape Town was going to run out of water and be the first 21st century city to do so. And so here I am in that context in South Africa, and what I'm doing is kneeling in the dirt, the same as him, 2 strangers, to observe the capacity of the other, the desire for, in his case, for healing or for forgiveness or for whatever he was seeking when he arrived there. And for me, the curiosity that I feel burns inside me whenever I think of what makes a photograph compelling to me. And then out of nowhere, because my eye was distinctly on him, I see this sleeve come almost directly towards me. And I recognize in quite the last second, because I'm shooting this all on a Mamiya, on a film camera, I realized quite at the last second that this water is about to go straight into his face and also into my camera. And I just photograph it. And so I would like to say that this photograph was, I sought this out and I wanted to speak about spirituality and water and religion and the healing, but I didn't. I went there without knowing any of that. I went there to look at the human touch, because the human touch is the thing in a drought that starts losing its feeling. Human vulnerability and human comfort is one of the first things to go during any large-scale crisis or tragedy. Is you just have people feeling alienated from their environment and from the systems of support, and sometimes sadly from each other. And I wanted to photograph that. And so I would say pretty damn lucky that when I saw what I saw, it was rewarded with something I couldn't predict. And this is really at the heart of the photograph's power. It's not too well composed. It's all right, but it's real, and that realness is he's somewhere else, and he's there for something otherworldly. And in some ways, that's the symbolism
too. Yeah, there's a fascination there too, since it's like a drought. Water is vital and it's necessary, and you're using it for salvation. You're not even consuming it. You're using it to save soul, which is, I think there's a wonderful tension there.
Absolutely.
It's a fascinating image.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on to the next one. Of course. And I might move at a faster pace and a faster clip through some of these, because some of them that inspired me to speak about them. Some of them don't. Bit of a moody one I am. All right, so I wanted to lead this introduction to the series with the more emotional scale of the work. So you're seeing Ram Bagat, a postman who had died, and whose brother, to the left in this frame, has taken his body hundreds of miles across Uttar Pradesh to Allahabad in India, at the confluence of the Ganges River. So in the far off, you see the highway. Behind him, you see the Ganges, and in the foreground, you see the burning pyre of one younger brother who had been in his late 70s, early 80s, I believe, and his older brother witnessing this last moment of his life. And this is an extremely private, in some ways also dystopian public, right? It has this idea that you would almost expect this very intimate and very difficult moment to be done, perhaps in a more natural setting, maybe a setting where the banks of the Ganges in the background are fertile and green, and that the foreground is not barren and strewn with trash. But we have just the opposite. The foreground is barren and strewn with trash and replete with it, because this was the site of one of the largest gatherings of human beings every so often in India, the Kumbh Mela. I think National Geographic pegged the population of this one area, this one holy area of Allahabad, at somewhere around between 35 and 60 million people. I have no idea how they calculate that. It's a pretty wide margin. Like when I made the notes of this, I remember this because I made a note of this and I looked it up in from a few different sources. I was like, this is extraordinary. First off, how do you count that? I'm sure someone's going to tell me, and after this podcast goes off, they'll definitely let me know. And then also like that's a massive margin. And what it really speaks to is just that's compelled so many people to go to this one area to have really intimate, spiritual, meaningful, personal interactions with water, and therefore the idea of the afterlife and the idea of their own existence. And I photographed this moment about a week or two after that event. So this area has been absolutely devastated by those millions of people occupying it. And I think this is a bit of the attraction of why I wanted to go to Allahabad at that particular time. Oftentimes in my series, or in the series, I like the moments after the moment. I don't necessarily, I don't think I know how to photograph the decisive moment, but I don't think every photograph needs to be the decisive moment. I think sometimes it can be kind of this non-moment, this eternal hovering type of thing, this awkward silence sometimes, or just this quietness between other moments. And this one, I feel, is that it's not the moment that the pyre was lit. It's not the moment the pyre is almost done. It's not a moment in which the brother expressed any more grieving than he had already expressed the hours I had spent with him. It was this hovering, constant sadness of one human being having to do one of the most difficult things any human being has to do, which is to let go. And I wanted to include that in the beginning, because you'll notice with the man beforehand seeking forgiveness, and with this brother saying goodbye, we're looking at water as some eternal subject matter. This
pathway.
Yeah. A way in which both it literally affects the landscape, because people are attracted to the holy Ganges in this site, and therefore has created this dystopian vision. But it also is the framework around a very human today. And I found that to be very meaningful about that. So moving on to another photograph. This photograph I had not shown anyone for years after. This comes from Nigeria. At first I didn't quite like it the first time I made it. And I shuffled it off to the part of my mind where I easily forget things, which is really convenient, because then during Corona, I went through my negatives again, because I was seeking to actually start scanning all these things that I avoided scanning. So to be honest with you, my approach was photograph. And in some years, eventually, when that pie in the sky book deal comes down, I'll sit down and go through the boxes with dream designer, and she or he or they will will guide me to the book of my dreams and blah, 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 blah. But this never happened. And I decided I would go through all these negatives during lockdown myself. And I did so. And I came across this photograph and it really stood out to me. And I decided, you know what? I don't have to have the same relationship with each photograph that I always want. Sometimes the photograph can be something very different from how I imagined the original piece. And I think that's good. I think sometimes the photographs will tell you what they need to be. So I really do love the angles of her. You see this like triangular angles of her face, of the cloth on her head, as it pulls back to her ear, to her neck, and that nape. And this area and then slopes down again. So it creates this very, very appealing triangle from which her face occupies the center, and therefore a very prominent and powerful position. And then you have these almost soft textures up into the orange and into the bowl itself. And the bowl is just, I don't know. I just find this bowl. This is my favorite part of the whole photograph is the pastel fruit and leaves painted upon this bowl, which then overlaps with a forced perspective of the horizon of this kind of quite barren riverbank, and I think it has something to it.
Yeah, you play with space really, really well, and the negative space is wonderful, and it's almost as if she's balancing the world on her head, but it's
that's really interesting. People have said that before, and I it's funny because I don't see it that way. Like I understand the idea, of course. What I see it as, I actually see it as something a little more annoying. I mean my perspective.
Okay.
I can't help. What I see it as, the horizon actually to me appears a little bit like it's being either almost like a sea, like it's kind of draining into the bowl itself, and as the blue of the sky kind of fades into like a little bit of a brighter mid part of the photograph, and it kind of has this hazy feeling in the distance. So it does feel like it's dissolving, and it almost solidifying the more it goes to the middle line or the sub middle line. I believe the middle of the photograph is a bit higher, and that for me was kind of where my mind was at when I was making it. And then of course I do understand the idea of the balancing act, of course, but to me that's not really what I saw when I was photographing. I really did see a little bit more of an annoying perspective, where I like this idea of it, kind of like
I would call it the surrealist perspective. Yeah, you have this draining into the head. Yeah, I think sounds like something a surrealist painter would do. But
or coming from it, either one. But yeah,
sure. Yeah, I guess you could. Yeah, I like that interpretation. I think it's pretty entertaining. It's wonderful timing. You talk about, I'm not good at the decisive moment. Case in point, right here. No, you are. That's yeah, you nailed it on that one. Considering you're shooting on film and stuff like that, it's not like you took 1,000 of these. So
I can't afford that. I can't afford that.
It's funny. It's how many people have I heard talk about all these discoveries that they have after or during the lockdown? It's like it created this mass opening for artists to kind of reflect on their work and pivot. Some people pivot, some people discover the old, and it was just fascinating. And this one was one of those revelations for you.
Yeah, I mean, what it really speaks to is the fact that I should have already done this. I think maybe. I mean, like I really do love the way you frame that, but the way I reckon I should have went through my negatives a long time. Yeah, moving on.
I find old photographers, and I've been doing this ever since I was younger, and even before I started as a photographer, I would go through people's negatives, and I would go through images, with them, and I would just sit there and listen, and I loved it. And then they would find images a lot like you did. I haven't seen that in years. I need to print that, you know? So I'm sure you kind of had that moment. You're like, man, I should have done this a long time ago. So, but it's all right. It's all right. Let's keep going with this next one here.
Yeah, so this is from the Nile River. And so part of the work I wanted to try to be inclusive of all of these like very defining river bodies and water bodies around the world. It's something that I find to be, I think it's like, I have to photograph the Mississippi in the same way that I have to photograph the Volga, in the same way that I have to photograph the Ganges or the Nile. And because these riverways are not just the riverways that mean something to us today, coming back to the idea of timescale, they have been like Sugimoto's work on the seas. I saw this in London recently, Sugimoto's photographs from the seascapes. And and it kind of reminded me of this concept. And what he was really doing, and what I find really, really valuable is when I look at his work, my mind goes to almost this eternal aspect to some of these movements. Sometimes it doesn't matter if this photograph was taken in 2018. It won't matter if this photograph was taken in 1980. It doesn't matter. There's something ephemeral and eternal and almost primordial about the renewing nature of what water offers for our planet's sustainability, for its life itself, but also as it reflects about the eternal nature of itself. Meaning that this ripple, this little attention to this ripple along the Nile, for me, constitutes like a character of the Nile and how it felt to me. And this is also just as relevant to include within a larger work that speaks about climate and speaks about water and speaks about human behavior, because this connects us to time immemorial, to time past when other human beings that have been caretakers of the planet looked upon water and felt maybe some of these same things that I felt, or maybe you feel, or think of when we look at these small ripples, these small changes, these small aspects of light. And I think Sugimoto's work is absolutely fantastic at making the mind go to this eternal nature. So I'm kind of stealing a little bit of his very clever and very insightful understanding towards what role time plays in photography, and therefore what role time plays in our understanding of where we are in it. And so this photograph I quite like for that. I like that it has no story. I like that I'm losing in chess on the top deck of a ship that I'm on, traveling down the Nile for some weeks. So in this way, I'm staring off at these ripples that are reoccurring moment after moment as I'm thinking about something completely different. I'm thinking about how to get myself out of a pickle with a knight and a bishop. And here, this moment is going on again, just to my, right off the bow of the ship. And my eye just kind of starts assimilating the detail of it, meaning that you look at something long enough, it becomes your world. It becomes your perspective, and your mind can then, I think, go places that are interesting, and your own past and relationships and things you want, how you feel. Like you kind of like, it's almost meditative in a sense. And I kind of was in that moment whereas this ship was lazily going down the Nile at sunset. And this is in the crepuscular time, and right after the sun had set. It's marvelous light. And I just was watching this ripple over, not this one ripple, but like, when a ship cuts through water, it creates a series of repeating echoes. And I was kind of, my eye was there. And then I noticed that in the aftermath, as they faded a little bit outside the reach of where the sun was hitting, the last of the sun was hitting, I saw that there was this absolutely little magical, a little bit of specialness, and that's where this one comes in. It's the far ripple of a ship cutting through the Nile River, and I
love the gradients in that, especially the highlight. Just it's really interesting.
it's what's interesting the most about it to me is it's entirely meaningless. You know, like it has no it has no value as a story. You know, and when you're doing the work across so long a period of time, you have to change. You have to, like, you're challenged by the different ways in which you've done things. And the problem with doing the work on things that are so relevant to human experience is that you judge photographs based off that metric sometimes. And I really like that this photograph has none of that. It doesn't. I'm going to move a little bit faster because I can ramble pretty damn well.
I love it. It's what this show's all about. So yeah, keep going. Well, you have great ramblings and musings, you know. It's like, I think you call it rambling. I don't. I think it's you have an interesting perspective in the way you think about life, and I think each image is kind of a symbol of a thought, you know, as you progress, and you can kind of see that in the work, and so it's completely relevant. It's beautiful. Keep it going. I love it. So anyway, we do. If you want to get to some of your later work, we are running kind of long, but I'll let you jump into this.
All right. So now we're kind of looking at the theme of access to water amongst the demographic that is primarily responsible for it across the world. In the coming decades, more than half the world's population is going to live in water-scarce environments. This is going to put a stress on all matters of social services and all matters of pre-existing difficulties or challenges within any country that's facing water scarcity. And so the symbol of who is facing that on the ground day to day, who are they, is so important for me to touch on in the work, because these people they're almost like the front line of that experience. And I didn't really want to individualize that front line too much by making it about one particular person and one particular story. So I wanted to approach the theme of water scarcity and access to water by looking at the ways in which that demographic displays these themes of strength and perseverance and resiliency, these very human stories. So that demographic that is on the front line, that's women across the world. It's, from my experience, from the data that we have seen, from research, from all matters of understanding, women and children have to gather water, put themselves at risk to gather it. Oftentimes unsafe water. Oftentimes, when they're pregnant, having to go up and down mountains, risk of spontaneous abortions, failed pregnancies, all matters of danger. And this also affects not only their bodies, but their social mobility. They cannot devote time for education or for other aspects of improving their lives because they have to trek maybe 2-3 hours through water scarce environments to reach that unsafe water source. And then their children will then suffer from that just the same. They might not be able to go to school, and therefore will lack in education. So you can see that access to water is not just the idea of consuming it, but it reflects a way in which a whole group, a large group, is prevented from having autonomy over their bodies and having the capacity to live a healthy and meaningful life. So, well, I actually want to correct that last part. It's not my place to speak to what is a meaningful life for them, but in some ways I wanted to say that what I actually mean is a meaningful life that allows them to have something more than what their circumstances restrict them to have. I believe human beings can gain meaning in ways far beyond the issues that face them. But in the way that I meant it, and the way that I mean it, is that the meaning in which they have the capacity to choose what to do with their life. Instead, they have to survive and make choices that are not that are based off of that survival, and therefore restrict them in some manner. And this kind of forms a little bit of the framework within the work, looking at the environments in which that exists and does that to the individual. So you saw 3 women pulling water from a well. You see Utria Nalo, a 29-year-old mother in southern Ethiopia, climbing down the side of a mountain to gather water for the beer that she's making for the men in her village to celebrate her coming birth. She's 8 months pregnant. So in some ways, there's this cyclic and absurdist abuse that is happening to this woman, because she's risking her child's life to gather water when the men should be the ones risking themselves to gather water and help protect her during this really critical moment. And I really wanted to hone in on that symbol by photographing her in repose, in the manner in which she's working. And then now you're seeing in Sierra Leone, in the fields where malaria is prevalent, the burning of the fields to find electrical pieces and therefore resell them. But this area, this trash dump, when it rains, it becomes a very dangerous point for the spread of malaria. And so I wanted to photograph these water scarce areas and the environments around them with individuals that are in some ways isolated. In the same way that you see these boys in this tree in southern Pakistan, in this drought-stricken tree, a bit of the wonder element is kind of at play here. You still see the singular character surrounded by nature, and I use that, connect these very different aspects of that same idea, the same demographic, those at the far end of the social ladder that are not being looked after, that are not being provided with help from their countries, and therefore have to bear the brunt of these very basic needs. Now we're kind of using the motifs that I build in one country and informing the aesthetic of another. So the photograph from Pakistan from 2013 from the water scarce region of Sindh, I sometimes like to, in my notebook, make notations about photographs that I'm going to use or that I've made, and certain types of aesthetics that I use, that I collect in my head, meaning that the modeled cemetery of Western Germany during their floods, I wanted to use that same aesthetic that links backwards through time to the photograph of the boys in the drought-stricken tree, the tree that lacks the very thing that's present in this photograph. It's now been connected in its texture. And I like to try to use these aesthetic tools because at the end of the day, I'm using a very simple process. I'm using a color film stock that anyone can buy. I'm using a Mamiya 7 that anyone can buy. I'm using 2 lenses, sometimes 3 that anyone can buy. There's nothing really special about my work process that there's not many tricks up my sleeve. I have to really rely on the connective tissue of my ideas and my research and my imagination to connect these different points in time and weave them together to make them reference each other on the conceptual note. And I like that. I like that restriction. I like that that parameter, and keeps me honest. Tonight, seeing some neighbors, and also from Western Germany during the historic floods there that happened in recent memory. You're seeing them cleaning and helping each other out, and at the same time, I try to use some of these compositional elements to reference each other. So you're seeing a certain perspective, a certain tableau of how a scene should be portrayed. And I use this within the DNA of the whole work to give these counterpoints of different types of societies. You're looking at a water point in Sierra Leone in the Crew Bay slum during the cholera outbreak of 2012. And before that, you had seen this other community in Western Germany being affected by another water issue. And that's how it looks in their reality. It's not one versus the other. It's not one is less worse than the other, but is that these are the different experiences in which groups of people at their critical moments of time respond to that water issue. This is how it looks for their reality. And I wanted to use a certain perspective, a certain pulled back, but very, very, you'll notice in both photographs, they kind of revolve around this circular composition where everything is kind of happening in the circle at a certain plane from the camera. I wanted to kind of use that as a tool in which to speak about human interactions at a certain scale. And so I came up with these motifs really over the years, because at some point one idea makes particular sense, and I like to kind of make the work self-referential in a meaningful way, so that it weaves together Sierra Leone, Western Germany, and the Los Angeles River, like you see here, into its own little sub-genre within the genre of talking about water as both an issue and a reflector. Now there's another scale of this in which this abstraction of the landscape through human use and its shape and its command and control has to be commented. And so I took to the air to kind of address this. And this is something that you'll see later on in the Arctic work, and some from the second part of the work, is where I go to the air and I try to photograph the systems of shape in water. So you get this very hovering perspective. And oftentimes these photographs, I like to imagine they are also a subgenre within the work itself. Because I want to be able to display these in different ways. I try to think forwards and backwards a bit. And I want to kind of imagine that maybe in a few years' time, I want these to be very large and backlit in really dark rooms. And I want viewers to be able to see a certain vernacular of thought in one physical experience. And then maybe I want the more human, isolated experience to be displayed in a different way. And so I'll be creating these different motifs within the work for that purpose. It's not just so that the internal language of the work makes sense and speaks, but I wanted to kind of give myself the puzzle pieces. In many ways, I think I don't really photograph like a photographer. I really do photograph, or I really do imagine these scenes more as from cinema. A lot of my experiences come from cinema, not from photography. So the idea of three people, this is something that repeats itself. The scale and distance of that person from the camera is almost identical from one country to the other, from certain perspectives, because I want that person to, in your mind and in viewer's mind, to be familiar somehow. When you see that man walking into the Yangtze, or you see those men dredging the sand from the bottom of the Yangtze, I want you to think of them as humankind. I don't want you to think of them as that swimmer or that person. I want you to think of them as something else. So much so that when we go to the reservoir in Brazil, that's 16% full, as Sao Paulo is going through a drought. In this photograph of the reservoir, the mermaid is now taking the place of that same scale. So the size of the man in the river, the size of the mermaid, the size of the people, then imply the scale in which man relates to his environment, or in some ways relates to his hubris, to his ego, his sense of control. And this idea of inversion. So now we're looking at the aftermath of a hurricane. And I like to photograph things from different perspectives, meaning that I want to photograph the aftermath of this particular hurricane in Florida, and then I go back and I photograph it, and you'll see later on and the other work from another perspective that's based off of restriction. So I'll only use one lens on that particular day, and maybe only use black and white film, because I know that it's not for this immediate work, that this photograph is for this part of the project and the other one is for the other one. And by doing so in this way, I give myself the necessary new limitations to not only stay focused, but to connect some things that I'm discovering in the places that I'm shooting. Follow the threads of those thoughts, follow the threads of those stories, and by doing so, stick with those ideas fully. And what I like about film, regardless of whether I'm shooting film or I'm shooting digital now, the mindset of shooting film is important. I think people get a little too interested in the result of film and not pay attention to the details. What film is good for is conviction. Everything else, I don't care. Yeah, the colors, yeah, blah, 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 the lights. There's so many good cameras out there. I don't know half of them. What really matters is what you see and how you respond to it, and therefore what you express. And you don't need a film camera to do that. You don't need a digital camera to do that. But one of those usually helps make a photograph. So when I speak to the idea of the film camera, having 10 frames on a particular day is good. It makes you have to commit to every single choice. And committing to that choice means it really matters. If it really matters in that moment, then and it costs you time, money, resources, error, most importantly, error, the capacity to fuck up, to not succeed, then you're really making something. I believe the most interesting things happen when you have the highest chance of failure, or that you are at risk of great failure. You're also at risk of great discovery. And I try to take that mentality from film. I'm not actually that much of a technician when it comes to photography. I don't really find that aspect of photography that interesting. But I'm more interested in the things it can say and do. And so I like to imagine that those 10 frames of the camera, each frame in my mind, when I'm walking through India, when I'm seeing these soldiers pushing this army truck out, I think, well, it's not the whole, is it the whole scene? Is it them from the moment I see it to aftermath or conclusion, and I shoot it and arrange it as a sequence? Is it just one moment? Is it where's the meaning? What's going on here? And when I think of that, I think of it that I should be able to encapsulate that idea on frame number 6. And if I can't do it on frame number 6, then maybe I shouldn't do it on frame number 7. Maybe I have to think more and photograph less. Or if I have only one frame left, then, and I know something, and I really feel that conviction of this is meaningful, and I have this desire to respond to it, then you only need that last frame. And I do think there is an element of development that comes from pushing yourself to commit to something, to say, yeah, I believe I can on that morning, on that day, I can do. And I think photographers should speak a lot more about what tricks and methods they use to keep themselves strong, to keep themselves vulnerable and strong when they're out in the field or when they're working on a project. How they confront those feelings speaks volumes to their depth and to their, I believe, into the more interesting aspects of how they think, because we all feel that. There's no one there patting me on the back saying, this is going to happen, this is going to be a good photograph. And oftentimes it's hardly me saying that to myself. So I try to remember that I need to find a way to believe in myself that day. And that means that I need to imagine that on frame 9, I can, on frame 1, I should be able to do this. I shouldn't need 8 more frames. And that's what I mean by the conviction of film. It's in a way a tool to create this little fiction, this little game in my head, so that I can be a supportive voice for my own creativity in the moment that I'm alone. So that's the first part.
A lot with film photographers. I asked that question. I'm like, do you enjoy the limitation of only having 10 to 12 frames, or do you enjoy, or do you use the entire roll for one? And it just really depends on the person, I think.
What kind of sadist enjoys that? What kind of sadist enjoys?
I don't know.
Not hanging out with their loved one and scanning film in a dark, expensive film. I do believe it's become extraordinarily preventively. It's become so expensive. And then you're by yourself. Like I'm sorry, I'm perhaps the least romantic person when it comes to this. It sounds way. It sounds, and I've done it. I've done it for over a decade. And as photographers, of course, that have come before me that have done it far, far more. But we're all different. We get different things out of it, right? And I can tell you from my part, like I don't want to spend time any more time getting darker.
So when they really started restricting and discontinuing a lot of films, did that affect you? I know it happened in the last few years. You know, it started to come back. You know, you started to get a lot more stock. But in this process, did that change your approach, knowing that you had that only? You know what I mean?
Interesting question. Like the economy of that tool, does it affect the process? Well, there's two things. One is a gripe. One is an outright gripe that I've not had It's absolutely, this may be a wine. A wine might be more accurate. But I was using in the Mia, and when they reissued the portrait, they used some type of thicker material. I don't know if you noticed this, and the back of that kind of started to catch in my Mamiya, and I thought this was, I thought it was just my particular camera. So I used another. I have a few, so I used another one, and it turns out that they had changed the thickness of something of like when you're winding the initial aspect, and so I was getting a lot of my film in my camera. I don't know if anyone else, or maybe I just screwed this up. But like I do remember that, like, seeing that the film that was reissued was a bit thicker, and it was having this effect, and it was really making the whole process more unpredictable, but not unpredictable good, but like unpredictable, like, guys, like, why are we reinventing the wheel? Like, just like, portrait was already good. You ran out of it, so just like make it the same way. No one wants you ever go to a restaurant and like this is a new take on a classic burger. You're like, we just want the classic. We just want the spaghetti arrabbiata, whatever, we just want a salad. Actually, you know what it is? We just want a seasoned salad. We just want a seasoned salad.
Yeah.
And instead Kodak,
that's the gripe, is that it changed
wine.
a little bit.
That's the wine. That wine.
All right.
But the other part is more seriously. How did it affect the process? I think I'd already outgrew it. Like I learned a lot of the lessons of like my thought process, and creative process, and organization of how to, I would scan after coming back from a particular trip. I would have like 90, 100 rolls of film, and I would scan essentially, and there's no exaggeration. I would sit down at an Imicon, I had a scanner, and I would scan for 14, 15 hours straight. And that scanner never stopped. I'm talking about always having something scanned. And that, when you're looking at your own work in that way, it's super helpful. You dial into it. You see all your mistakes. You have to organize. You have to rate. You have to be able to say, this is what I did wrong, or this is where I could improve. You really got to live with your mistakes and with your accomplishments and with whatever's there, whatever's in there. And then at the same time, that I kind of did that for so long that I kind of do that in my head now in so many ways. Like I don't really need to be in front of a Imicon for 15 hours anymore to kind of understand the thought processes and choices that went into crafting my initial work. So in that regard, like I don't. And by the way, this is the least appealing way to get a sponsorship from Kodak right here. This is like, they're gonna listen to this one person. They're like, this ungrateful whiner.
They're gonna say, we fixed the thickness issue. Thank you.
Please.
And you heard your podcast. Yeah.
Please. I don't even use it anymore. So like,
I'm sure in the comments anybody using that camera is gonna say something. So is the second part that you were talking about of the water series that you haven't really shown yet?
Yeah, I'm sure a few things. Yeah. So this work. Okay, so this is kind of like the inversion. So if you can imagine, the main body of water of the project is the first part, the one I showed you, that I'm continually adding to within that very pastel, almost inviting way in which to view these vignettes of the condition. This right here is like, I wanted to strip that away. I wanted to have the second part also be an evolving, continually added piece of the work. So I call it part 2 in some way. I wanted to kind of imagine this as a sequel to that idea, but I want it to be an exact inversion. So in both subject matter and the manner in which I view it, it's all the pretense, all the things that I think worked in the other in the main piece, I kind of wanted to avoid those things. I kind of wanted to work against my type. So this is some ways is I'm very happy to be able to share a few of the photographs from it. But it also speaks to the visceral, immediate, and vile nature to what human beings are doing to the planet and what we're doing to ourselves. So a lot of the things in this next part, in case anyone's watching this, a lot of the things in this next part should have a disclaimer that they are depicting death and suffering. And if you are sensitive to that, perhaps we can put into the text of this podcast that they can skip ahead from a certain point to another point, so they can avoid that. But yeah, that's kind of what this part of the work is. So this is the second part.
Took a different turn there. You start off with these. You can flip through if you want to flip to your another one, but you kind of you make a shift there. You have these very spiritual, like using water, this like pathway to enlightenment kind of moment. This transition of death. Almost these beautiful moments that water provides, and then also you're kind of showing our impact on that. And now you're making kind of a dark turn. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah.
Is it just the part of the journey? Is this, you're doing this journey for a long time and you're now seeing the effects and this part of the story needs to be told?
I'm angry. I won't lie. I'm angry. I am very tired of seeing people that have no reason to suffer be made to suffer for us to have plastics and one person to drive a 30,000 euro vehicle and all by themselves pump out. I'm angry, man, and that anger I've tried to funnel and pour it into the work itself. And this is kind of this part of the work represents that. It's me just not wanting the viewer to get any satisfaction from the photograph. I want them not to have. And then one of the things that people always had said when they looked at the first part of the work was that they loved the colors, and I used this color range as a little bit of an invitation to get people to look into some of the things I wanted them to say. I wanted to frame this shared dream, first part of the work, in a way that will allow us to both think of it as a shared dream, as this fantasy of how we interact with it, but also for them to be able to stick with it and be willing to engage with it. And then after some time, after doing this for some time, I realized I just wanted some of the photographs to not give you that. And I want them to be unpleasant. I want a viewer to look at that and not like it. Because if you don't like it, well, maybe that might inspire you to commit some time to volunteer in your local area and make a difference in a way that can, rather than say, oh, all of these things are happening and I can't affect them, so why do anything? I find that mindset to be so restrictive and very egotistical, as though if one person that has climate anxiety can't solve the world's problems, they should do nothing. I find that to be abhorrent, and this part of the work and the Arctic, I think where I'm at now as a photographer, as well as what these two pieces demonstrate, is that I really have very little sympathy now for the comforts of the developed North and the Western world to ignore that paradoxical and self-centered way of engaging with climate, and I just have no desire to facilitate.
Yeah. You're not trying to romanticize water per se. It seems like that there's a didactic here that you're pointing to, and I think it's quite powerful. I think it's really, really interesting. It's almost like the invitation into the myth of water in the previous part, and this is the reality of it, which is it's interesting. And why no color? I'm noticing a lot of black and white.
It's all black and white. The reason why is like the color doesn't matter. It's not only the color, but like color informs the temporal idea of a photograph, right? When we look at a color photograph, we tend to, even if we cognizantly are aware that this photograph of this politician that's in black and white, like that person's alive, then we know this person's alive. By removing the color, it makes that person or event slightly dislocated from our understanding of time, because time to us in our immediate reality is informed by so many things. But most of all, whether we are aware of it or not, it's informed by how light affects us and how it informs what we can understand and what we know and what we can see and what things appear as and what things don't appear. And I wanted to strip that away. I thought the easiest way to do that was to, regardless of whether the photograph was made in color, made in black and white, or if I liked the color of the scene, and I was using that as the imperative in which to make it, then I would just say it just ends up drained of it, because I wanted the time scale of this ruthless look at the surreality of this. I wanted that to dislocate the viewer. I wanted them to have no understanding of footing. I wanted them to have less text. I wanted them to look at this and be like, what the hell am I looking at? I wanted the mind to not be able to scrabble and claw onto easy captions and easy answers that allow them to justify a sense of, oh, this is happening over there. Oh, these colors are nice. I can appreciate it for this, whilst at the same time, I don't really want to interrogate it further. That's the reason. I wanted the abstraction to have an actual purpose. I wanted to create very visceral links between them, and that I needed to be able to have an outlet for these types of observations within the same body of work. And I realized, why not? Why would I not? It's I get to make the choice. That's my responsibility to the voice of the work. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to totally change how I see and think about what I make. And this part kind of represents that.
So do you see these being shown in a similar manner as the you're talking about? And so, yeah, talk to me about that. So before, I'm imagining your show right now. Backlit, very large, dark rooms for the first series. How do you see this one being put up?
Sometimes the individual photographs I imagine them. I was just the other day. I was at the photography section of the Victoria and Albert Museum, really, really lovely in London. And they have, in one of their displays, they have this little device in which you put your eyes to it. Like they have this little goggles on a desk. It's kind of like this black box and has this like binoculars embedded in it. And you put your eyes to it and you kind of click through it. I wrote down what it was called. I don't remember when it was. But I remember putting my eyes to it and clicking through it and seeing old aerials from World War I, and it's kind of speaking about how photography was being used to gather information, and this was what the display interested in, and I imagine this work kind of replicating in some way this aspect of the viewer having to look inside the box. So there's two things that I kind of imagine this part of the work as, and where it will go is that this part of the work is a bit of the river Styx, right? Like we invite the viewer down it. It's only going in one direction. It's going to hell, and that's the feeling. That's why it's surrounded by black. That's why it glows from the inside. It's the living hell that we are creating on the planet, and I want the viewer to have to make a choice to see that. And I don't want to just give them. So like maybe one or two photographs will be oversized light boxes, because I find that to be a very useful display model. And then maybe some of them are 3 or 4 of them are on, you have to go to this very mechanical, almost Blade Runner 2049, when he's like clicking through this like high-tech, low-tech device, and you put your eyes to it and it's like blasting you with light. And you're curious because of the apparatus, and you have to click through it like you're looking through an old carousel, and all you get is 3 photographs, or maybe you get a series of photographs from one IDP camp, or maybe you get You know what I mean? Like whatever it is, I'm kind of speaking in abstract.
Yeah,
But
giving yeah,
but you see what I mean? You have to sit down and you have to say like, it's one person at a time. Like you have to say like, I'm going to look at things that me being a citizen on this planet is some of the rent I pay. I have it so damn good here. I'm able to go and eat that fire oven pizza any time of day. I'm able to have Uber Eats. I'm able to have all this stuff. The least I can do is click through some photographs that I know are going to be unpleasant. And by doing so, I will have a deeper understanding and appreciation for what is happening in the world around me. And hopefully, if I do my job as the photographer, the motivation to persevere, because the people within these photographs are persevering. And I do not have, at this point of 12 years of photographing climate, I do not have much sympathy left for people and their willingness to give up or not look at hard things. No excuse anymore. There's a ton of hard things in the world. So what? Get right back to it. Show yourself what you're really made of by showing that you can care. Because the strongest people are the most vulnerable. And I find that to be the truth in my friends. I find it to be the truth in what I've seen in a photograph. And I find it to be the endurable truth of photography, is that its ability to communicate the vulnerability of the human experience gives it its great power. So if that means clicking through some photographs that are unpleasant, if you can do it, I would encourage you to. If you fundamentally are traumatized by something that I can't speak to, and I can't speak to that, then that's your own thing. But if you can, then I do believe you have a responsibility to do that.
I think it's powerful. I think it's really powerful. This kind of this evolution. This gives us a great way to kind of slide into the next piece here. How do you see Arctic serving the whole body of work that you're doing? Take us through that next.
So I did this one last year, 2022, on a fellowship from the Bertha Foundation. They were really lovely and gave me the support from which to be able to have the independence of time. Time is so important. I feel like perhaps an underrated creative tool is that good things do obviously take time in most spheres of creativity, but some things that take time, you need them to teach you what they're about in the course of doing it. So when I've always wanted to photograph the Arctic, it's Antarctica, the Arctic. Yeah, you'll notice in the course of the what you've just seen and what you just heard, I've touched on both the immediacy of the surreal. I've tried to touch a little bit on the abstraction of how these things, these issues, move between our understanding of time. And I've also tried to speak to the immediacy of the pain and suffering of those that have been confronted with its brutality. And so the Arctic represents something of the next step, because with this work and the work that I continue to do, it will be much in the vein of all three pieces blended together. And what I mean by that is the Arctic, when you close your eyes and you imagine it, chances are you can imagine a polar bear, you can imagine some ice, you can imagine some snow, blah, 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 blah. And that is a fantasy. The Arctic is warming, parts of the Arctic are warming 3 times as fast as the rest of the world. Sea ice is melting in record lows and likely to not come back in the coming years. The Arctic is under threat, and it's the canary and the coal mine that signifies that the coal mine is poisoned and we must evacuate. The Arctic is a symbol to us far more than it is a reality to us. So when we imagine that polar bear, or even the desire to see a photograph of a polar bear, this I could not tell. I couldn't go there and make a photograph of it. Because by doing so, I would be fulfilling that fantasy that we collectively have of this region, and therefore contributing to the misunderstanding of its valuation and its inherent importance. And therefore, I would be making a work that would be a discredit to its actual importance. So I decided what I would do is I would photograph the fantasy of the Arctic as the theme itself, whilst at the same time using those symbols to speak to the scale in which we see it. So the first photograph is of an iceberg in northwest Greenland. You're looking at the inside of an iceberg from a very massive glacier in Inuit. And I wanted to evoke the sense of inside out, obviously, but I also wanted to blend the sky and the snow and this like bleeding of light, of almost like you died and went to heaven type aesthetic, with this very raw, eternal, scarred, almost looks like granite. It doesn't look like ice to me. It looks like you rip a bandage off of something too soon, and this is what it looks like. It's unpleasant. You want to put it right back together. So this is kind of really the approach I'm taking with the Arctic, which is under threat. So my subject matter, while familiar, I wanted to subvert it by speaking about it in a different way. So you're looking at this photograph from the Arctic Ocean. So this is record low sea ice melt. The sea ice is melting more and more, and it won't reform into the future because, of course, our planet is warming. So you're seeing the white is snow, the tan is land, the blue is water. And I wanted to use this feeling of like almost looking through like a petri, like a microscope, looking at this event. Almost like you're studying it in a slide and it's 2150 and you're looking back at like, how did human beings not notice this was a really, really shit idea, to make this happen? And I wanted to look almost like you're studying our virus or our viral behavior. And so this is where this blending of black and white and color, but also scale is coming into fore. But I can't quite help myself, and I always I'm a bit of a sucker for this very cinematic feel of taking feelings that I've seen in cinema and translating them into things that I see in other places. And what I mean by that is this atmosphere, this font is from a day that was particularly notable in Svalbard, in the archipelago of Norway and the Arctic Circle, where there was one day it was negative degrees, the next day it was 15, 16 degrees, and above zero. So it went from ice to melted fog, running water. It felt like I was in a murder mystery. It felt like I was in this like this really, really scary dream. I wasn't supposed to see the ground. I wasn't supposed to see some of these things. They were supposed to be covered in snow. And the structure that you're looking at is a failed dome that was constructed to be a garden in the Arctic. It's nothing. You can't really grow some of these like flowers or certain types of plants that you would consume. You can't really grow it in the ground there. So you kind of need to have an apparatus to do that. And I like the skeletal nature of this. I like the feeling of that type of structure, very human, the symbolism of it, the desire to cultivate life. And I like seeing that it's been reduced to a skeleton. And you'll notice that this is also a theme within the series, is reduced to something, right? You have the halved iceberg, you have the skeleton of this dome, and then you get this compression, this very large scale, overwhelming the frame of human action. You're looking at a dock, and this dock is like many docks that you'll see across the Arctic. It's in some ways producing, shipping. It's a point of commerce for not that area, but for us in other parts of the world. So in this area, they're fishing halibut like crazy, because halibut at the time when I was photographing it was in high demand. So our consumption behavior, our consumption patterns dictate a whole series of outcomes that we never get to see. And for the most part, when we imagine the Arctic, we imagine that polar bear. Don't forget, we imagine that some people even along the way when I was doing this asked me to make some photographs of penguins. And I always like this. I always enjoyed when people ask me to make photographs of an animal that exists in the opposite direction of the Arctic. And it speaks to that fantasy is what I'm really trying to get at. When we imagine the Arctic, we don't like to imagine that unpleasant dock that exists because we like to eat halibut. Like we want to imagine that polar bear. The polar bear is not just the symbol of the Arctic. It's a symbol of our willingness to ignore the Arctic. And so that's why I blended this type of aesthetic, this version of the Arctic. So now you're looking at the aftermath, the blood on the sea ice of a seal that's been butchered by Inuit hunters. And I thought this was an important texture to evoke in the viewer's mind. Blood upon water, death, again, the temporal nature of something, the compression, looking at something, its scale, relating and being relative to the photographs that come before and after. In some ways, the Arctic is the more complex version of everything I ever wanted to shoot. And now you're looking at a mine that is far from the prying eyes of the public. And this is why the industry, the mine itself, its lead and zinc, is able to conduct its behavior in this way, is because the viewer cannot easily see it in Alaska. You would have to do what I did. You would have to hire a reluctant pilot out of a very specific place to fly over it in order to see it. And that's a part of the way I wanted to approach the subject matter. I wanted to show you some things that you've not seen before, and I wanted to show you some things that you have seen, but not give you the seal. I wanted to show you its blood on the ice. I wanted to show you the texture of staining the land as the idea, and the blood on the ice, and the pollution in the mine for me are just as important to consider simultaneously in the forefront of our attention, where things should be in some ways. Like this is where the work really allowed me to expand upon that. I got to play with the relative subject matter and like its importance. Like this is melting permafrost. Permafrost is a whole other issue, and about what risks and dangers come along with it and a changing climate. But I also didn't want to make a story about permafrost. I don't think many people are going to want to open their newspaper in the morning and be like, "Oh, I would love to, read 15 pages long form piece on permafrost." Like, I don't really know if that's the general public's way of interacting with climate change. But if I can evoke the idea of displacement within that very valuable subject to read about, then I can maybe perhaps get that general public to be interested in it and to feel that.
You've had a front seat to these experiences, and I hear your passion. I hear your anger. I hear you're really connected to this. Is there a hope? Do you think there's hope?
Hope for what?
Hope. Is there hope that we become aware of our impacts? Is there hope that something can come out of this, or is it just so rapidly changing that it's almost like you're on a roller coaster to hell, and there's really no way you can get off the track? Do you feel any hope?
Of course. I wouldn't be on this call if I didn't feel that. I wouldn't be on this call if I didn't feel any hope. That's a lot of double negatives I like to simply say, yeah, of course there's hope. There's hope every single day, And I want to be very specific. Every contribution a human being makes to improving the lives of their neighbor, family member, loved one, of their immediate environment, to be sustainable, it matters. It's a fiction. Don't ever believe. It's a fiction to believe that it doesn't matter. And the only system of thought that wants to promote in our daily lives that our choices don't matter, the only system of thought that wants to do that is capitalism. Because capitalism needs you to keep on behaving unsustainably. Its only purpose is growth. It has no other end goal. And it cannot be justified. We live on a finite planet with finite resources. That is the only place we can survive. And we are making massively poor decisions collectively towards its well-being. And by doing so, not without irony, we are poisoning our ability to survive. That is an existentialist question rather than a question of like preference. Anyone that doesn't believe in climate change, they will fall into the footholes of the footnotes of history as being those people. The real future, the potential of our solving this issue comes from every single human being that holds a candle against the darkness of those ideas. And that's the conviction I have, even while being angry, even while being hopeful. Being angry and hopeful are for me not opposite. I can be angry at something that I don't like and be hopeful and purposeful with what I do about it. And so long as I view that, what I do contributes, that it is a candle for not only myself to understand my existence and the time I live in, but others to feel and connect to that, then I am doing something with my time on this world that contributes to carrying that flame forward. And I touched on this a little bit, but I do believe whether or not I get further support for this work, whether someone buys prints and helps me make it, whether or not someone gives me an assignment or no one cares about it at all, will make zero difference if I don't care about it myself. So I try my very best to persevere. I try my very best to believe and do what I say. And I hope that when somebody feels that they are on the roller coaster to hell and they feel that things are bad and they feel like, what hope is there? I would say, cry me a river. And when you're done, look around and think about how you could help somebody that isn't you. And that's the source of joy. It's a source of happiness. That's a source of beauty. That's the source of meaning. I promise you the best things in photography and life come from discovering that it's not about you. And if we can have those two ideas, that's what I'll leave on. If you have two ideas to have is that by honest reflection, what your contribution is to the world and how you can make that better. And then when you do so, remember it's important to think about other people. And if you can help somebody today, that's the actual hope. That's the difference. You helped someone that wasn't helped yesterday, you just made a huge difference. And that person will have the capacity to do that again, and again. It is only because we think by consuming materials and consuming objects that we are absolved of that responsibility. Are we in this situation at all?
Do you think by expanding like the way we think about these things and just stop thinking about yourself and exposing yourself to work like yours can kind of help us break out of this mold and into something else, just to realize, do you think your work, let me kind of rephrase it. Do you feel like your work is attempting to try to point to that there's something bigger than yourself, that you, believe it or not, you're a piece of this machine, but you should probably contribute to something bigger than just this constant, immersion into our society through social media and all these other things. Is that what you're kind of alluding to in your work? Is that?
Yes, the connectivity. I think we're all craving that, like we are searching in so many channels and avenues for human connection, for meaning. We're doing it constantly, regardless of what we want. We can imagine it's social media that's preventing us from doing that. I don't really buy into that. I would say we are perhaps giving too much credit and too much merit to anything but personal choice. We are seeking in so many ways to constantly distract ourselves from confronting one of the hardest things for a human being to confront, which is themselves. And once we confront ourselves, we become self-aware, we become aware of our mortality, we become aware of our responsibility, we become aware, and this is rather unpleasant. This can be difficult. And rather than seek knowledge, we will seek destruction. And that destruction comes in the form of self-delusion. It comes from actual destruction, violence. It comes in materialism. It comes in so many different clothing, so many different ways, so many ways. But I think that the antidote, the thing that I try to provide is that by spending time in this mindset, this approach, this space, this way of communicating, that you too have the capacity to find the equivalency of what you just experienced, what you just felt in your own, and show that to somebody else. And I don't care if that's with a pen. I don't care if that's by teaching a group of children at a museum. I saw this the other day. I saw a group of maybe 8, 9-year-olds sketching at one of the museums in London. And I was just like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. Those teachers, thankless job. They get paid so little for what they provide, so critically important. They're bringing these children and giving them love, life, and enjoyment, and teaching them how to have the ability to look at something and express their feelings, and your feelings matter, and that you can look at the world and understand it. That's man, that's amazing. And I looked at that and I thought, we're doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing. And we have to make sure that we are able to do that for each other. It's that's why I kind of really wanted to come back to, I don't believe my work is the end all. I view that I want to be able to do the very best I can do about something I think is important. And then I know some little girl, some little boy somewhere is going to look at it or something else, and they're going to carry that flame forward. And maybe they fix it. Maybe they do. Maybe they do it in a way that I can't. But that doesn't mean that I have to stop, and that doesn't mean that I should. What it means is I'm a part of something larger than myself. And I try to promote that idea and what I photograph. I try to promote that idea and how I speak about it. And hopefully by someone listening to that, if you take nothing else from my time here, is the one understanding that do not under any circumstance forget that you have the capacity to do just the same. And you should, because if you feel that it's important and you can contribute to something better, you have the responsibility to do that thing.
I think that is a great way to finish up our talk today. Thank you so much for your time. Your work is very, very powerful, and you have a very, very very fascinating way and a very powerful way of presenting your work, and it comes through in the images even without your words. But having the words just adds another depth to it that I think is really, really amazing. So with that, tell everybody how they can find you or reach out to you.
Sorry, I was thinking about I was trying to remember my own email address. It's my name. It's pathetic. You can see my work on my website. I I think that's always the best. I tend to imagine that is kind of more the space in which I usually can express what I want. I'm having an exhibition in the coming year in the United States at the Minnesota Marine Museum in January. But Instagram, I kind of use Instagram as a storefront, as a way to communicate what things are happening. It's not really the best platform, I believe, but you can find me on Instagram under my name, which is somewhere on your screen or has been said. So, someone said
it'll be in the comment section or the about section of below. Yeah,
I really do hope so. And and of course the best way that I feel like is that gives me the ability to. I love making prints, so the prints that I've been making on this very delicate Japanese paper and some other printing processes are my way of making a physical object of the things that I care about. So prints are always a really good way for people to interact with my work. And hopefully in the next, I'm not going to say a number, but in the next few somethings, I'll be able to have a book come out. So those are the ways. Yep. That was really, it's a long-winded way of saying, go to a website, Instagram, some prints and blah, blah. But thank you for taking the time. And I've really enjoyed speaking about this work and showing some of the stuff. And I hope everyone's enjoyed. I hope I made some sense. You did. It
feels wonderful. And I loved looking at it. And so, and speaking with you and so to everyone out there, thank you so much for joining us. If you love this content, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to support content like this, also sign up to be one of our Patreons on patreon.com. And with that, we'll see you next time.